Right, my dear children. Now, in the earlier chapter, we discussed several things related to the food preservation and the aim of food preservation, how to identify the food which is being preserved, right? And we conducted an activity how to identify this preserved food also, right? And we identified that there are several factors which is getting changed during the spoilage of food also, right? But however, those factors are not getting changed within the preserved food. So those things were discussed in the earlier chapter. Now within this chapter, we'll be discussing about further details related to the food preservation process. Now in the end of the last chapter, we discussed that what are the types of preservations that can be done to the food, right? So we can do several preservation types. So within this chapter, we'll be identifying what are the preservation types that we can do in order to like keep this food for longer time period. So here mainly we are focusing within this lesson part the traditional methods of food preservation and as well as modern methods of food preservation and so on. Okay. So let's start the traditional methods of food preservation then. Traditional methods of food preservation. What are the traditional methods of food preservation? We'll see. So from the distant past, humans have adopted various methods to preserve food. Even today, they are used with minor changes. Some traditional methods used to preserve food and examples for them are given in the figure below. Right. Now, from our earlier age, from ancient time period, starting from Veda people, right? So, those time periods are pretty much ancient. From that time period also, right, this preservation of food were there. Those people, those ancestors, they did several things to preserve food. They used smoking, right? Then dipping in honey. Like that way, they did several things to preserve food. However, when you come into modern era, in modern era also we preserve food by doing the same technologies, by following the same technologies. But however, there are like minor changes. Minor changes means here the mechanism is same, but however the way of doing is somewhat different from one form to the other. That's it. Okay. So in the ancient time also people used several preservation methods in order to keep food for a longer time period. So my dear children, within this figure given, you can identify those things, right? Within this figure, you can identify those things where ancient time period, during the ancient time period, the people which used to, the methods which the people used to preserve food. So let's head on to see the diagram then. So main traditional methods in preserving food can be considered as salting, smoking, immersing in bee honey, drying and keeping under dry sand. So in each of these steps, my dear children, the main function or the main thing that we are going to do is we are going to inhibit the growth of microorganisms. Okay, we are going to inhibit the growth of microorganisms. How come? By controlling the factors that the favorable factors for the microorganisms like moisture and temperature. Okay, we are controlling those factors and we are minimizing the growth of microorganisms. Okay, we are minimizing the growth of microorganisms. So that's how we are going to preserve food items in each of these steps. Upon doing these, anything, right, any step of these, what we are going to mainly do is to minimize the growth of microorganism and minimize the contact of microorganisms with the relevant food, or else we are controlling the favorable factors necessary for the growth of microorganisms. Right then, so let's see what are the food items that we can protect or preserve by adding salt. So salting, we can do it for mango, lime and fish, right? Salting, we can do it for mango, lime and fish. Especially for these ones, mango and lime, we can do salting. My dear children, what is the purpose of salting? Why do we need to add salt? What kind of a thing is going to happen when you're adding salt? Right? For food items, when you add salt, excess salt, right? What will happen here mainly is, upon adding salt, my dear children, what happens here? Salt has a special property that can absorb water. Salt has a special property that can absorb water. Okay, salt can absorb water, especially crystalline salt has a good ability of attracting water. So upon attraction of water, microorganisms will not be able to grow. It's because they also need water or moisture in plenty. So microorganisms will not be able to absorb necessary amount of water for their growth. So in that case, food will not get spoiled because growth of the microorganisms is going to reduce within the food. Okay, so these food can be, if you want, you can wash very well, then you can consume. Okay, so that's what do we do mainly in salting, right? That's what we do mainly in salting. So I think you have consumed dried fish. Dried fish has a good salty nature. So when you eat dried fish, mainly during a night period, you would feel during the night after you go to sleep, you would feel good thirsty. It's because that the salt content contained within the dried fish is going to absorb more and more water from your body. So you may feel thirsty, right, during the night. So these salts can absorb water vapor, moisture very well. So thereby the factor moisture is getting controlled by adding salt. Thereby we can save or preserve food. So upon salting, my dear children, what we are going to mainly do here is we are going to reduce the level of water contained within the food, and by that way we are reducing or we are inhibiting the growth of microorganisms. So these food items like mango, lime and fish, right? Mango, lime, fish. In these food items, we can do that thing, right? We can add several amount of salt, excess salt, and we can preserve food items, these food items, right? So if you add salt, excess salt to lime, this is the one which is referred as lunu dehi, right? Pickle lime, lunu dehi. Right then. Then smoking. So smoking is also another method that we can use to, right? Smoking is another method that we can use to preserve food. It is also a traditional method, right? It is also a traditional method. So here when smoking, we can preserve these types of food items: meat, fish, Gracenia or Goraka in Sinhala, right? So these kind of food items we can preserve by the smoking process. So what happens in the smoking process, my dear children? Same thing happens like in salting. So upon smoking, the water which is contained within the material or the food item is going to vaporize very quickly, and the food item is getting dried out. Okay, food item is getting dried out, right? When water is getting evaporated, food item is getting dried out very quickly. So this food item, upon drying out this food item, what will happen? The food item can be kept for a longer time period, because as the favorable factor moisture is not there, microorganisms will not be able to grow as they need. So therefore, food item is getting preserved or food item is getting saved. So my dear children, here by smoking process, we do the same thing like in the previous. We are reducing the amount or the volume of water contained within the food item. Reducing the water contained within the food item. By that way, we are going to, what we are going to do is, we are going to save or preserve the food. Okay. So meat, fish, Gracenia like things can be preserved by the smoking process. Even for today, if you go to Rajarata area, those people save or preserve, especially their meat and fish, by smoking, right? By smoking, they preserve these, and they use those things as dried fish and dried meat, right? Okay, then immersing in bee honey, another traditional method, immersing in bee honey. So that dry meat which took from smoking process can be kept for even longer time period if they are being held within bee honey, right? So we can dry out we can dry out meat or fish by using smoke. Then we can place them within bee honey. So by that way, we can keep this thing for a very long time period, like in months and years, my dear children. Nothing is going to be happen, because here the contact of microorganism is like 100% is getting minimized. Okay, up to certain greater extent, the action of microorganism is minimized when you dip it in bee honey, because bee honey is very thick and there is very less amount of water vapor or moisture, right? As there is very less amount of water vapor or moisture, the spoilage process is going to delay at very larger extent. So we can keep this food item for a very longer time period, right? So by immersing in bee honey, we can keep, right? We can keep this food item for a very long time, immersing in bee honey. Then my dear children, drying. So you know that drying is same as in each of these instances also. We like in salting and in smoking also, we did the same thing like drying, right? It's the same thing. Drying means absorbing water vapor, right, or moisture. Why do we need to absorb water or moisture? It's because that for the action of microorganisms, for the growth of microorganisms, water or moisture is very important. So if you can reduce or if you can avoid the moisture or the watery nature in food, then you can reduce the spoilage process. So here also, upon drying, my dear children, what we do mostly is we are going to reduce the amount of water contained within the food item. So we can do this thing to jack, breadfruit, paddy, green gram and chilies. So jack, when you dry jack, it is referred as attukos, right? It is referred as attukos. So earlier when we are discussing that activity, we studied about that attukos thing, right? Dried jackfruit. So dried jackfruit or attukos can be kept for a longer time period. So upon drying, here we are reducing the amount of water or moisture contained within the food item. Okay, so dried jack or attukos can be kept for a longer time period without getting spoiled because of having less amount of water vapor or moisture. Then the next one, paddy green gram. So paddy and green gram also the same thing, and breadfruit, like you know that breadfruit thing is also similar to the jack. We can follow up with the same process, right? So paddy and green gram and chilies. Paddy, we have to dry it for a long time. Green gram is also the same. We have to dry it for a longer time. By that way, we can keep those things for a very long time, especially paddy and green gram, as they are cereals. We can keep it for a very much longer time period if we can, you know, like dry it for a very longer time period, right? And the final one is given here, chilies. So as the chili harvest is there, right, when the chili harvest, when the farmers are going to take the chili harvest, most of the times they are transporting these to the market. However, when there are excess amount of chilies, what they are going to do is they are going to let it somewhat ripe and to become red color. Then after that, they're going to pluck these things out and they're going to dry it, right? They're going to dry it and making into a powder. So we can make spices, right? So that we can make different spices. However, those dried chilies can also be used as an alternative for the for spices, for different spices, right? When making different food items, right? When making different meals, we can add these dried chilies, right? So most of the people, most of the farmers, my dear children, they follow up with this method to consume at their houses, for their houses to consume. What they are going to do is they are going to let it ripe for a certain time period, and after that they are plucking them out and drying it, okay, and drying it in order to have a, you know, like in order to keep these things for a longer time period within their house. Okay, so most of the time periods farmers are tend to do this thing at their home in order to consume dried chilies right then. So drying is also a process, a similar process, where we are going to remove excess water so that we can preserve food item. Okay, then my dear children, the final one which is given here, keeping under the dry sand, keeping under dry sand. So by keeping under dry sand, we can preserve lime, ginger and jack seeds, right? Jack seeds, even at your home, right? If you are like living in some kind of a village, right? In towns, I don't think so that these kind of things will occur most of the times. But however, if you guys are living in, you know, like a village, or else if you are living in some kind of a rural area, then these things are being followed by even your parents, especially from your mother. Your father is going to do this. When the jackfruit is, when you find a good jackfruit, right, some amount you eat, okay, then the seeds which are coming out, your mother is going to place these things within, okay, within sand. So it helps to avoid the contact between microorganisms and the jack seed. By that way, these things are getting preserved. Okay, by that way, these things are getting preserved. And my dear children, upon keeping within the sand, the moisture needed for the growth of microorganisms are also getting reduced. Because within dry sand, there is no water vapor now. So, necessity factors like water vapor is also getting reduced. So, by that way, these microorganisms will not be able to grow as they can. So, if the microorganisms are not growing, then we can easily preserve the food item. So, especially we follow this thing for the jack seeds. So, jack seed meal is very tasty. Okay. So, these jack seeds which are being stored within the sand, finally we can use it as a meal by cooking it. Okay. So, the other thing is ginger and lime. We can do these things, this dipping under sand thing to ginger and lime as well. Okay. So, for ginger and lime also we can follow the same method in preserving. So, in each and every cases, my dear children, which are followed here, these are traditional methods. These are simpler methods in protecting or in saving food items from microorganisms. Here what we are going to do is very simple. We are going to inhibit the action of microorganisms. We are going to inhibit the spread of microorganisms by covering it with a suitable cover, or else we are avoiding the growth of microorganisms by reducing the water content. Okay. So, this is how to preserve food items by using traditional ancient method. Even for today, my dear children, we use these things in several occasions. Right? Even for today, we use these things for several occasions. Right then. So, let's head on to see what are the other contents regarding our lesson. So, as you can see here, several figures are given. Right? Several figures are given, you can see. So, in the first figure, you can see that there is mango, right? This mango. So, this mango is cut into several pieces, right? And the other figure, you can observe lime. So, within that figure, lime is stored within a basket and filled up with salt. So, this is salted mango. Salted lime. Then next figure, this one, this is the one which I told you, right? So, this is smoking. This is specially smoking of fish. So, you know, the rural people, they use this smoking process in order to protect or in order to preserve food, especially fish and meat. So, this is how the smoking is being conducted. Okay, within a certain oven, what they are going to do is they are going to light up the oven, but here we are using wood especially that emit large amount of smoke. Okay, by that way they are going to smoke the necessary food item and it is being preserved for a longer time period. Especially here we follow these things to follow these things for meat and fish especially. So, this is a figure where smoking is conducted for fish. So, this is smoking of fish. Smoking of fish, right? Smoking of fish. Then in here you can observe there are jars, and within these jars you can see it's been printed as beef. So meat, right? Yes, type of a meat. Okay. So here the jars contain, my dear children, the jars contain bee honey, right? So these dried meat items are stored within these jars that contains bee honey. So by that way we can preserve the necessary food item. Here especially it is meat. So dipping meat in bee honey, right? Dipping meat in bee honey. So these are several ways these are several traditional ways which food can be preserved, my dear children. So food can be preserved by using these traditional ways, So these are very simple, as you can see here. So in each of these instances, what we are going to do is we are going to reduce the action of microorganisms. We are going to reduce the action of microorganisms by reducing the necessary factors, by reducing the favorable factors for the growth. Right then. So you are given with an assignment. Collect information about the traditional methods used to preserve food. List traditional methods you discovered and provide examples for each of them separately. Right, in the earlier figure, we studied about several traditional methods of food preservation. Now you are also given with an assignment. You can even make a booklet from this thing, right? So this assignment is about to collect information on how to preserve food by using traditional or ancient methods. Okay, right? Traditional or ancient methods. So I'll mention just 3 of these examples, right? I'll mention 3 of these examples. At your home, you follow up with the traditional methods of food preservation once more and try to get even more details. You can even ask from your mother or father. They will have a good sound knowledge in preserving food by using traditional methods. Okay, right. So I'll write down 3 examples regarding this, my dear children, so that it would give out a support for you guys. So number 1, we can say drying. Drying by smoking. Drying by smoking. What are the examples? We can dry meat by smoking, then fish, right? Meat and fish. Then number 2, we can dip in honey. Dip in honey. What are the examples? You can dip meat in honey. Different types of meat can be dipped in honey in order to save or in order to preserve. Then number 3, dipping in dry sand. Sand. Dipping in dry sand. Examples. What are the food items that we dip in dry sand? Lime, right? Lime. And jack seeds. Lime and jack seeds. We dip these things within the dry sand. in order to avoid in order to avoid the spoilage, right? Okay, so these are the things, these are the traditional things that we can do. I have written down 3, my dear children. You follow up with the lesson once more, and even if you want, you can ask from your mother or father, even you can refer your grandfather or grandmother as well, right? They would have even more good knowledge in preserving these things, right? So go ahead and ask from these guys, or else you can even follow with the book once more to find out even more details regarding the traditional methods of food preservation, or else you can refer the internet. By using the internet also, you can get even more knowledge regarding the traditional methods of food preservation. So I have mentioned 3 of the methods. Okay, so you follow with the lesson once more and you can find even more details. As a support, I have mentioned here 3. So what are these 3? Drying by smoking. So we can dry meat and fish by adding smoke. Then next one, dip in honey, right? Dip in honey. We can dip in honey, right? What is the one? Meat. Then we can dip in dry sand. I'll mention as just dip. It's good, no? Dip in dry sand. Right. So we can dip lime and jack seeds in dry sand to preserve, right? To preserve. So these are the ways, traditional ways, some traditional ways, my dear children, that can be used to, right? That can be used to preserve food. So those are the traditional methods then. So by modifying these traditional methods up to a certain extent, right? By modifying means here we are using different kinds of machines or any other instruments, right? By using machines or instruments, what we are going to do is we are going to do the same process like this, like these processes. We are going to same thing. Now if you take drying is a traditional method, no? So by using different kinds of instruments and machines also, we can dry out food. However, that main concept is drying, but as we are using new machines and other stuff, it falls under modern technology. So therefore, right, it cannot be considered as a traditional one. However, the procedure is same. Procedure is drying. That's why I told you that there are minor changes between the traditional methods and modern methods. Okay, so now let's see what are the modern methods of food preservation. So let's head on to see the modern methods of food preservation. But before that, you are given with another assignment. What is that? Collect information about the modern methods used to preserve food, along with examples present how those methods help to preserve food. Right. Once again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 3 examples. Okay, 3 examples on modern methods that can be used to preserve food. So if you take milk, my dear children, we can do several things to preserve milk. However, I'll give you an example. If you take milk, we can make sterilized milk. Sterilization means here we are killing microorganisms which contain within the milk. So by that way we can keep milk for a longer time period. Okay, so milk can be sterilized and kept for a longer time period so that they can be consumed. Okay, right? Sterilized milk. So in sterilized milk, we are killing microorganisms and bacteria or whatever the types of microorganisms contained within the milk, and we are sealing it so that those things are not getting exposed with the external environment, right? We are sealing it quite well. So after breaking the seal, you have to keep this thing in a refrigerator. After breaking the seal, it's important to keep it in refrigerator, otherwise you won't be able to consume for a longer time period. However, it can be consumed within 1 day, but if you keep it for more than 1 day, then it will spoil, because new microorganisms can enter to the system from the external environment, So therefore, it's important to consume within day or two, right, after breaking the seal of it. So sterilized milk can be used as a good option to preserve milk. Okay, sterilized milk. So here I'm going to write down number 1. Sterilizing milk. So here what we are going to do is, mainly kill microorganisms contained in milk. Kill microorganisms contained in milk and sealing the bottle. Bottle is being sealed, otherwise new microorganisms will come and contact with the other. Okay, so by that way, we can preserve. We have to seal it down, otherwise there is no use. Then number 2, adding chemicals. So these chemicals are referred as preservatives and additives. So we can add different kinds of preservatives and additives to the food item in order to destroy microorganisms and in order to minimize the growth of microorganisms. Okay, so for the earlier one, we wrote that thing as milk now. So for the second one, we can write down adding chemicals. So it would kill microorganisms, killing and controlling both can be taken. Controlling the action of microorganisms. Killing and controlling the action of microorganisms. So here, killing and controlling the action of microorganisms through chemicals. Through chemicals. So by adding chemicals, my dear children, we can kill or we can control the action of microorganisms. So what are the examples? These chemicals are added to jam. jam, then cordial, then fruits, canned, or we can say it as a common one, packeted food. Right? So when we are making jam, cordial, then in normal fruits also, and mainly packeted food, mainly in packeted food items, these chemicals are being added. Definitely these chemicals are being added. Okay. So by adding these chemicals, it inhibits the growth of microorganisms. Okay, it reduces the growth of microorganisms as it is going to harm the action of microorganisms, right? So by adding these chemicals, especially these packeted food items, fruits, cordial and jam can be preserved. Okay, these things can be preserved. Normally if you take cordial bottles, jam, and almost each and every packeted food which you are going to buy from supermarkets, if you check the ingredients, they are mentioned in that. Permitted colors and preservatives are being added. Permitted colors, additives and preservatives are being added. So these preservatives are important to keep these food items, right? Important to keep these food items long lasting. These preservatives are pretty much important. So these chemicals are specially named as preservatives. Just for now, I have mentioned these things as chemicals. So when we are discussing about the lesson, furthermore, you will get to know about the preservatives and the chemicals that we are going to add to save or to preserve food. Okay, right. So these are just two examples, my dear children, right? Not traditional, two modern methods of food preservation. So I have written down two. So you may find out some other good examples, right, which can be used to preserve food, but however they should be not traditional, but they should be modern ones, modern trends. Okay, so I have written down two. You can even go through with the book and find out even more details, or you can refer articles, sometimes internet you can use, right? And however, try to find out more details regarding the food preservation by using modern methods. Okay, right then. So let's head on to see what are the other contents in the lesson. So now we are going to discuss about modern methods of food preservation, right? Modern method of food preservation, my dear children. So under the modern method of food preservation also, you can observe the drying process. So number one is given as drying. So in the traditional methods also, right? In the traditional methods also, my dear children, we found out drying. We discussed about drying, right? We discussed about drying. So that means this drying thing in the earlier case, we did it by simpler methods, no? But however, now when you are using modern trends, it's going to be somewhat complex because these things can only be conducted within certain environments only, like in laboratories or in food processing factories. In normal household environments, you won't be able to do these kind of things as they are modern trends. So these things can only be used in certain technological development, in certain areas that has a good technological development. Okay, so even though the process is same, the tools and the instruments that we used in this process is somewhat different than the traditional methods. However, the mechanism is same. Drying means drying, right? Drying means drying, right? Now let's see how to dry, right? By using modern methods of food preservation. So the first thing is given, drying by sun's heat. Here we are utilizing the solar energy, right? Energy contained within the sun, solar energy. So drying by sun's heat. Unlike in the past, at present, the solar heat dryer is used to dry food. So solar heat dryer is an instrument that we use to dry food items by using solar energy. Since a closed condition prevails within the dryer, more pure and dry food can be obtained within a shorter period of time. Now the specialty here is that, my dear children, within a shorter time period, we can obtain the food item. Dried food item can be obtained within a very shorter time period. That's the specialty in here. That's why we are using these modern methods of food preservation. By using modern method of food preservation, we can save our time. Now in the earlier case, now let's imagine that you guys are going to dry chilies. So in that case, we have to keep the chili under the sun for about weeks in order to dry properly. If these things are not getting dried out properly, then definitely those things will get spoiled. Okay. So however, we have to keep these things for a year, for like weeks, right? Definitely you have to keep it for a week or two in order to dry chilies. But however, if you use the solar dryer, you can do it within days. Okay. So it will make your work pretty much efficient. So modern technologies, modern instruments especially, they accelerate the process. The drying process can be accelerated by using modern instruments and tools. So that's the specialty in modern methods of food preservation. So here the instrument called solar heat dryer is used to dry food. As it has a closed condition, right? It is having a closed condition, right, my dear children? Within the dryer, it has a closed condition. So therefore, a good amount of heat is getting contained within the system, so that the food item is getting dried out very fast, right? So more pure dry food can be obtained within a shorter time period of time. Mixing of waste, damages caused by animals and rain can also be prevented by this. So you know that this is a closed system, right? So if it is a closed system, there can be other difficulties in drying. Like if you dry chilies in normal environment, if the rain is going to come, then you have to run and take the chilies once again back to the home. Otherwise, they will catch up with water, and definitely what will happen? Definitely, like within 1 or 2 days, they will spoil once again. So those things will be useless. Okay. So sometimes when you keep these things near, when you keep these things under the sun, and you can't watch it for all the time period, no. So you have to do your works. So when you are coming and doing other kind of works, sometimes birds and other organisms or animals would come and eat these things, or would come and take these things away to a different location, right? Sometimes dogs and cats may come and sleep on these things, right? So there are like certain factors like that as these things are opened. Okay. So however, if you use the solar dryer, as it is a closed system, these external factors will not be affected at all. These factors will not be affected at all. right? So they will never, or these solar dryers will never having any issues with external factors like animals or else weather conditions, right? There won't be any problem at all. Then this method can be used to preserve food items such as chilies, fruits and vegetables. So we can use this solar heat dryer in order to preserve food like chilies, fruits and vegetables. So we can dry out chilies, fruits and vegetables mainly by using this method, by using the solar dryer. So now let's head on to see what kind of a thing is called as this solar dryer. So this is the solar dryer, my dear children, right? Solar dryer. Okay, so it's really simple. You take this thing and you insert all the necessary things to the stove. Then this is the solar ray absorber. Then there is a black lining to absorb solar radiation. Then glass or plastic cover can be observed. Then air currents are coming from here to there. Okay, so you just need to add all of the stuff to the stove and keep it under the solar radiation or solar heat, right, where you can get plenty amount of sunlight. So all the other things will be automatically conducted by the solar dryer. So as you are going to close this thing, right, other external factors are also not going to affect at all. Okay, other external factors are also not going to affect at all. So by that way, right, it's easy to, easily we can do the drying process and your time will be definitely saved. So this is called as the solar dryer, solar heat dryer, my dear children. So it's very simple. It's like this. Okay, solar heat dryer, right? So solar heat dryer can be used to dry out vegetables, then fruits and chilies. Okay, right then. So this is the drying process, drying by sun's heat, the solar dryer. Right then. Then the next one, my dear children, here this is also a step of drying, but however within this will be using or will be utilizing stoves, right? So this is referred as the stove drying. By using a stove, right, by firing up a stove, we are going to dry the food item that we want. So this is also a efficient method as we are doing, as we are drying it by using a stove. So second method is given, stove drying. Stove drying. Under the drying process, the second method of drying is stove drying. So here, ability to give the appropriate temperature for the food that is dried is an advantage of this method. Stoves which use electricity, gas and mineral oil are used for the drying food. This method can be used to preserve food items such as chilies, fruits and mushrooms. So as you can see here within the figure, this is a stove. So you apply fire to this stove by using or by through a different location. So this is the stove. So you just need to insert as plates, okay, like an oven. So by that way we can provide the amount of temperature which is needful or which is needed, right? The needful or the needed amount of temperature can be directly given. Needed amount of temperature can be directly given, and even we can control the amount of temperature by reducing the by reducing the material or the raw materials which are being used to get the fire. So by that way we can If we want, we can increase the amount of temperature, or if we want, we can reduce the amount of temperature also. So the necessary amount of temperature can be given to the food item during the process of drying. That's an added advantage when following this method. Okay, it's an added advantage. So however, my dear children, within this process also we are going to dry, but the specialty here is that by using a special stove, we are going to dry out the food item that we need. Okay, we are going to dry out the food item that we need by using a special stove, right? These stoves are operated from wood or any other material, like electricity also they can be taken. There are stoves which are operated from even electricity, like a same like as an oven. Okay, electric oven. So this is the second method of drying process, stove drying. Okay, stove drying. So stove drying can be applied, or stove drying can be used to dry out materials or food items like chilies, fruits and mushrooms. Chilies, fruits and mushrooms. Okay. So this is the one, my dear children, which is referred as stove drying. Stove drying. Stove drying. Right. Right then. Then the next drying method, this is referred as the spray drying. Spray drying. Okay. So under that given, when water is removed, milk becomes dry powder. Now milk, if you take cow milk, more than 90% of cow milk is made up with water, right? More than 90% of cow milk is made up with water. So when evaporating water from cow milk, the milk particles can only be separated. Only the milk particles can be separated, right? What you need to do is mainly, you just need to evaporate water, but there is a problem here. What's the problem? Problem is, when evaporating water, upon providing heat energy, milk particles also going to evaporate. So that's a problem. Okay. To overcome this problem, we use the special method called spray drying. Spray drying. Use the special method which is called as spray drying. So let's see what is spray drying then. When water is removed, milk becomes dry powder. We know that. Hot milk is sprayed onto a heated cylinder with high pressure. Therefore, microorganisms do not grow. Now there is a machine here, right? In this machine, there is a thing which is getting rotated at a very fast speed. So milk is pumped into this machine. So as that machine is going to rotate, the milk which is falling onto it will spread, and what will happen? Will hit on the wall of this thing, this machine. So when that thing is going to occur, when milk is going to hit on the wall, water is getting evaporated very quickly, as it has very high surface area. And the other thing is that as the milk is somewhat high in temperature, microorganisms contained within the milk also die. Okay, they also die. So finally, on this wall, that milk is collected and converted into a dried powder. Okay, converted into a dried powder. So that dried powder is finally being packaged and being sent to the supermarkets and market in order to sell. So this is how you get milk powder. So this is the simplest method of getting milk powder, right? We use the machine called the spray dryer. Then by using the spray dryer, We are going to remove water content within the milk, and after that we are making it to a fine powder, right? We are making it to a fine powder, right, my dear children? So this method is referred as the spray drying. So in spray drying, what we are going to do here is mainly same process, drying, but as we are using somewhat advanced technology in drying process, a sprayer. So this is a modern technology of drying process. Okay, so even the temperature is somewhat greater, so we increase the temperature to kill microorganisms, right? So this machine is called as the, right, this machine is called as the drying or spray dryer, right? So this is the machine that producing milk powder, this one. Okay, spray dryer, right? Then, so milk powder is the, milk is the main food item which is being preserved by using the spray drying. Okay, so here milk can be converted into milk powder by using the drying process, right? Then the second method of food preservation, here we are using not traditional, my dear children, advanced methods. So the second advanced method of food preservation is temperature control. We control the amount of temperature, right? We control the amount of temperature control. So let's see what is temperature control then. A favorable temperature, here it is given 40 degrees of Celsius, is essential for the growth of microorganisms. The growth of microorganisms could be controlled by reducing the temperature to a value that is unfavorable for their growth. Now, the favorable temperature is the room temperature, which is up to like 40 degrees of Celsius. Okay, up to like 40 degrees of Celsius. That is the room normal temperature which microorganisms can grow. Up to 40 they can grow, right? So, by controlling means here we are minimizing or reducing the temperature. We are reducing the temperature. So, upon the reduction of temperature, microorganisms will not be able to grow as they are doing in the usual way. So, if the microorganisms will not be able to grow as a usual pattern, as to the usual way, the microorganism, action of microorganisms, right, or the growth of microorganisms within food will not be happen up to a greater extent. So, in that case, my dear children, the food item is getting preserved. The food item is getting preserved. Here we are making an unfavorable condition for the growth of microorganism or the action of microorganisms. We are making an unfavorable condition. We are creating an unfavorable condition for the growth of microorganisms, right? Upon creation of unfavorable condition for the growth of microorganisms, the food is being preserved as there are, as the growth of microorganisms are very less. Okay, so how we are making an unfavorable condition? By reducing the temperature less than the room temperature, normal room temperature, right? So favorable temperature is around 40 degrees. It is essential for the growth of microorganisms. So the growth of microorganisms could be controlled by reduction of temperature to a value that is unfavorable for their growth. Then the first thing is given, first and foremost, right? First and foremost method under the reduction of temperature or temperature control, that is freezing, right? Freezing. So when the word comes freezing, you know this is talking about Refrigerators. The refrigerators. In refrigerators, we use the process freezing. Okay. So let's see how to freeze a certain thing. The temperature of the food material, right? Temperature of the food material is kept at a low value than the surrounding temperature. It is important to maintain the temperature of ordinary freezing chambers always below, see, 4 degrees of Celsius. 4 degrees of Celsius. So, in freezing chambers, we are keeping the temperature below 4 degrees of Celsius. Like 1, 2, 3, 0 and so on. Right? So, here the food item is getting saved by the reduction of temperature. If the temperature is getting reduced, my dear children, then the microorganisms will not be able to act on that type of food. That's why we keep fruits and vegetables like jam, cordial, all of these things within a refrigerator. By keeping these things within a refrigerator, we can save or preserve these food items, because upon freezing or upon reduction of temperature, what will happen? We can reduce the growth of microorganisms, or the action of microorganisms can be reduced. Okay, so this is freezing, my dear children. Freezing, right? Freezing. Then remember, always when freezing, you have to keep the temperature below 4 degrees of Celsius. Okay, below 4 degrees of Celsius, you have to keep the temperature. Okay, that is an essential point. You have to keep the temperature below 4 degrees of Celsius in order to do this thing, right? Okay, then. Next one, temperature control is the one, but the second method, here now we are discussing about what? Deep freezing. Deep freezing. Okay, deep freezing. So, in deep freezing, my dear children, the temperature is below like -18 degrees of Celsius. -18 degrees of Celsius. Now, at this temperature, right, what will happen? Definitely ice is getting created, because ice is getting created at 0 degrees of Celsius, no? So, if it is even below that, definitely ice is getting created all around the food item. Especially we can save meat and fish, and we can keep it for like few weeks by using or by following this method. We can keep it for few weeks, my dear children. We can keep it for weeks, okay, by following the deep freezing process. Deep freezing process. So, here the temperature is kept below 18 degrees of Celsius, -18 degrees of Celsius, prevailing in deep freezers is advocate to prevent the growth of most microorganisms. So, most of the microorganisms, like here now, like 90 to 95 amount of 90 to 95 percentage of microorganisms won't be able to grow within these food items if you deep freeze it. That's why like we can keep meat and fish, and especially sausages, right? Meatballs, these processed items and also fresh ones. If you defreeze it, you can keep it for a very long time period, like in weeks. If you expose these things to normal environmental conditions, you take a fish and you expose it to normal environmental conditions, definitely that fish will get spoiled within 1 day. 1 day is the maximum. Maximum means you take the fish in the morning time period, and when you take it in the evening, definitely that one will get spoiled. Definitely it's going to spoil. However, if you are going to defreeze it, you can keep it for weeks without any problem. Okay, here the action of microorganisms are getting reduced at 90 to 95%. Okay, upon the defreezing process, as the temperature is very low like negative 18 degrees of Celsius. So by deep freezing, natural color, taste and nutritive value of the food can be protected to a large extent. So here, by deep freezing, my dear children, we can save these color, texture, nutritional value, nutritive value. All of these factors can be saved for a longer time period. Only thing that you need to do is, when you are if you are going to need this food item, you take it out from the deep freezer, you let it some time so that the ice would melt, then you can cook it. Okay, there is no change in the nutritional value, there is no change in the appearance, taste or any other, right? So deep freezing is a good method of food preservation, right? It is a good method of food preservation, right? So this is about the deep freezing, my dear children. Then, so in freezing and as well as deep freezing, right, what we are going to do is, we are going to reduce the action of microorganisms by controlling the temperature. So this is the second method of preserving food under the modern methods. This is temperature control, right? Then, so my dear children, under the temperature control, now you can see freezing is given at 4 degrees of Celsius. So if you take a normal refrigerator, the bottom part, right, bottom part contains the 4 degrees of Celsius part, this one. So here you can store different kinds of food items, right, like different kinds of drinks, fruits, vegetables, then juices and so on. Okay, in normal refrigerator, the below chamber, right, below chamber, the temperature is around 4 degrees of Celsius, where you can keep food items like fruits, vegetables, juices, then drinks and so on. Okay, so this is the normal freezing. Okay, normal freezing. Then the deep freezing. So food items such as vegetables and fruits can be saved by freezing, and also by drinks as well, fresh juices as well. Fresh juices can also be saved up to a certain extent. Then the deep freezing. So in deep freezing, negative 18 is the temperature. We can save or we can preserve food items such as meat and fish and ice cream, especially ice cream. Okay, meat, fish and ice cream, and also sausages, then processed meat items like ham, bacon, those can also be saved by keeping in deep freezers. So this is the deep freezing unit in your refrigerator, the upper or the top portion. So here you store ice cream, then meat and fish and all the other meat stuff, right? And there are certain other types of deep freezers like this. In supermarkets, I think you have observed these things. So these deep freezers are used to store, like if there are heavy amounts of loads, then in that case you have to use a deep freezer. That's why in supermarket especially we can see these things. In a supermarket, my dear children, there are a large number of contents, no? Not just 1 or 2 packets, there are like several hundreds of packets. So they should have plenty of space. So that plenty of space, to provide that plenty of space, the deep freezers are being arranged like this. Okay. So as I told you, like here we can keep the processed food items like sausages, meatballs and ham, bacon, those kind of stuffs. Even in nowadays, starchy food items, right? Starchy food items, those are also being stored here, right? Those are also being stored here, starchy food items like Chinese rolls, those things are also now been produced. You just need to take these things and deep fry it, that's it. Okay, then potato chips, those things are also being produced and they are being kept in these deep freezers, so that you can you just need to take them out and you just need to cook it and take it out. It's very simple. Okay, so those prepared food also being stored within these deep freezers, right? Prepared food also most of the times these prepared food also being stored within the deep freezers, right? So this is the second method of food preservation, advanced technologies of food preservation, modern technologies, right? Freezing and defreezing, freezing and defreezing. Right then, so now let's head on to see what are the other contents. So here is given another assignment. State some food types that can be preserved by keeping in a refrigerator. Make a list of food that should be kept in a deep freezer for preservation. So by keeping in a refrigerator, what are the food items that you can preserve? Then by keeping in a deep freezer, what are the food items that you can preserve? So you have to prepare a list. So as usual, I will give you a simple support, right? I'll be writing down 3 examples. If you can go to a supermarket, my dear children, you can write whole list of a stuff, right? Just go to a supermarket and open the deep freezer, that's it. Then you can write down, even you don't need to open those things because there are the top one is, or the top closer is definitely transparent. By just looking at the deep freezer like this, you can write down like several things contained within it. Okay, very simple. If you can go to a supermarket, then you can like write down several things which can be used to defreeze, which can be preserved by defreezing. Okay, right. So however, I'm going to give you 3 items as a support. At your home, you find out even more details about the food items that can be preserved by using freezing and defreezing. Okay, so let's make a table and we'll write down. I'm going to write down 3 of these food stuff, just 3. You find out even more. Right, so this is here the first one. Food can be preserved by keeping in a refrigerator, right? Refrigerator. In a refrigerator, I'll mention. Right, in refrigerator. Then here deep freezer. Right. In a refrigerator, normally we can keep vegetables. Then fruits. Then my dear children, juices, fresh juices. Right. Then in a deep freezer, you can keep meat, fish. Then I'll write it as processed meat. Example, ham, meatballs, and so on, right? Bacon, sausages, those things, right? Those things can be kept within a deep freezer. So I have written down 3. This is only as a support, my dear children. This is for the assignments are for especially for you guys. So you guys have to try it at your home, find out even more details. But however, I'll be giving some support, right? Small bit of a support. So you have to find out these things at your home, right? Find out even more things. So I told you that the easiest way, just head on to a supermarket, look at the deep freezer. You can find different food items that are being preserved within the deep freezers. Right then, so we can normally store vegetables, fruits and juices within the refrigerator, and in deep freezers mainly we store meat, fish, processed meat like ham, meatballs, sausages, and also like ice creams we store within the deep freezers. So this is, my dear children, about the freezing and deep freezing. So my dear children, now let's move on to see the next one, our next content. So we discuss 2 main methods of freezing. Okay, 2 main methods of here, actually the temperature control. Now let's go for the third important method, or the third main method of food preservation, modern method of food preservation. So this third method of modern food preservation is the concentration. You can control the concentration, right? Concentration means number of particles contained within the substance or the material. Number of particles. Actually, what we are going to do here is we are going to increase the number of particles of the substance. Thereby, we are reducing the water content within the substance. This thing can be done mainly for substances like jam, cordial, and juices. Okay. So here we are increasing the concentration of these substances by decreasing the amount of water. Okay. So let's head on to see what is the content given. In canning and bottling, water in food is removed. Hence, the concentration of the food is increased. This controls the growth of microorganisms. Here we are controlling, right? Here especially we are controlling the water content. Water content, my dear children. We are containing the water in the food item, right? So here water content in the food item is getting controlled. So when there is less amount of water within the container or within the food item, microorganisms will not be able to grow as they should. So if the growth of microorganisms are getting reduced, definitely, my dear children, we can save or we can preserve the food item. So it is like a trick. Here we are reducing the amount of water and we are increasing the concentration of the food item. Each and every food item in our world, in our biosphere, it contains some amount of water. Definitely it contains some amount of water. That's why when you are heating a certain food item, a vapor is going to come out. And when you place a plastic sheet or else a polythene cover, you can observe droplets. So those droplets are water droplets, right? Those droplets are water droplets. You can observe this thing with any of a food item, right? We can observe this thing with any of food item. So my dear children, each and every food item contains some amount of water. Each and every food item contains some amount of water. Okay. If you can reduce the amount of water contained within the food item, definitely you can reduce the spoilage of food, as water is an important factor for the growth of microorganisms. So how we can reduce the number of water particles or amount of water? That is by increasing the other contents contained within the foodstuff. Okay, we are increasing the other contents, and by that way we can reduce water to a certain level. Okay, so here this controls the concentration of the food item, right, is increased, and it controls the growth of microorganisms. Microbial activity is further suppressed by the addition of preservatives. So I told you that preservatives are like types of chemicals that we add in each of these substances in order to minimize, right, in order to minimize the growth of microorganisms. Preservatives, these things are called as additives and preservatives. So like I said in the earlier, when we are discussing about the modern trends of food preservation, we discussed that adding chemicals, different chemicals, can also be used to minimize the growth of microorganisms. So this is that. Especially when you are making jam, cordial, and concentrated food juices. Okay, when you are making concentrated food juices, we add these chemicals. These things are called as preservatives. There's a whole bit of a lesson part which we are going to discuss about the preservatives and additives. So we'll be explaining about those preservatives and additives within that lesson part, my dear children. Up to now, you just remember these chemicals which we add in order to prevent the action of microorganisms are called as food preservatives. Especially we are adding these things to food in order to preserve, right? So the microbial activity is further suppressed by the addition of preservatives. So this method can be used to preserve food items such as jam and cordial. So here within jam and cordial, my dear children, and there is another one called as concentrated fruit juices. Concentrated fruit juices means the concentration of the juice is very high. You can take like small bit of a volume and you can make like a huge glass of juice. Okay, huge glass of juice. So those ones are called as concentrated fruit juice. Concentrated fruit juice, right? So we use these things in cordial, in making cordial, right? In making cordial, in making jam, we use this, right? We use this technology. Concentration is getting increased. Now when you know that when you are making jam, we boil the fruit item, right? We boil the fruit item and we evaporate water. Then by adding sugar and other preservatives, we keep it for a longer time. Then finally we are going to bottle it. That's how we are making jam. So within that, less amount of water can be observed. Very less amount of water can be observed. Therefore, my dear children, as the concentration is water is very low, as there is less amount of water, right? What we can do here is we can preserve the food item. We can preserve the food item. Okay. So this is how concentration works to minimize the, right? This is how the concentration works to minimize the spoilage of food. Okay. We can increase the concentration, right? And then what we can do? We can preserve food. It's mainly because of reduction in water, right? It's mainly happening because of the reduction in water. Right, my dear children. So we discussed several things related to the food preservation part in here also. Especially we discussed about the, right, especially we discussed about the modern trends and the traditional methods of food preservation, right? So in the next chapter, we'll be discussing further things with the lesson, okay? Especially in the next chapter, we'll be discussing about those food preservatives, my dear children, right? So we'll meet you with the next chapter. I'll meet you with the next chapter. We'll discuss about the food preservatives and any other things contained with the lesson.